very much. We're going to have more on this China economy with David Loevinger. He is the Managing Director and Sovereign Analyst at TCW, joining us now. Welcome to the show, David. Let me first by asking you about this RMB, the Mr. RMB, the change potentially at the central bank. How closely are investors watching this potential change, and how might that affect the renminbi strategy going forward?
Yeah, well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. We're all watching developments in China very closely, particularly as we head into a period where there's continued difficulties in Europe and a looming fiscal cliff in the U.S.
Do you think that there will be a change in policy with new leadership now in China? Although the central bank, they haven't made any formal decisions as of yet, but do you anticipate any changes in strategy?
Well, it looks like we're heading into a period of uncertainty with Chinese monetary policy. Two of the key architects of Chinese monetary policy over the last 5 years are moving on. Not only Governor Zhou, but even more importantly, Wang Qishan, who was the vice premier in charge of monetary policy in the financial sector. It looks like he's going to be preoccupied with more domestic political issues in the year ahead. So we don't know who's going to be in charge of monetary policy, but I'd have to say, if you look at who was promoted in the Central Committee last week, there's encouraging signs. People like the current securities regulator, Guo Shiqing, the chairman of the Bank of China, Xiao Gang, and the deputy governor of the PBOC, Yi Gang. All these guys were promoted last week. All these guys have very deep experience with financial markets, with monetary policy, have very strong reform credentials, and they also have very strong links with the international community.
David, I'll apologize first because I'm going to ask a very simple question. And I guess maybe simple for us, but maybe simple for you, but complicated for us. And that is, as we look at the world in total, the central bank in China essentially sets monetary policy, correct? If that's the case, we look at what the U.S. Federal Reserve has been under pressure. You talk about the fiscal cliff. It's not their responsibility, but they'll take part of the blame for that. In Europe, central bankers there are also very careful about how they set monetary policy because of all the rising debt levels. Do you think all this uncertainty around the world would cause the central bankers in China perhaps to be even extra conservative here?
Well, I'd say one big difference between monetary policy in China and monetary policy in the US and Europe is that monetary policy is not set by the central bank. It's set by the State Council. So I think there's not an independent central bank in China, and decisions about monetary policy, I think, are linked much more greatly into overall economic policy and fiscal policy.
All right. David Loevinger of TCW, thank you very much for joining us.